Hello, everybody. How are you? Early morning on another sunny day here in Pittsburgh. And guys, the reaction I'm getting from these videos talking about fan favorites of the past in the rich sports history of this town is amazing. Baseball, football, hockey. And you're saying, well, what about basketball? Well, of course, there's no NBA team currently in Pittsburgh, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't always a professional basketball team in town. And if you're a longtime Pittsburgh resident, you know all about the Pittsburgh Pitstops, who reigned over this town of Bridges with their basketball prowess for decades. The Pitstops are no longer, but that doesn't mean that there weren't fan favorites from that team. And why should we leave basketball out of our roundup of favorite players from the Steel City? So here are three fan favorite basketball players from the old franchise Pittsburgh Pitstops that bounced their ball on the hardwood and hung from the rim for decades, bringing championship basketball to this town, but unfortunately the team didn't make it. But that's the world of big-time sports, guys. So let's go back to 1937. I don't know if you were around then. I know I wasn't. But there was a player on the Pitstops. His name was Homie Teapot, and Homie Teapot was not really big player, even for an era where players aren't near the size they are now. But Homie Teapot, what he had was speed and an unbelievable ability to dribble behind his back. So he had a incredible method of coming down the hardwood very quickly while dribbling completely behind his back. And they talked to the team doctor, and they said it's because he has a body physiology that allows him to do that without the basketball hitting the back of his feet. Because if you've ever tried it, that's the tough part, is you hit the back of your feet with the ball. But this guy, he had it perfected. He had the physiology, and he had the tenacity to work on his technique with this since he was 2-3 years old. Now, this guy grew up in Tampa, and his father was an amateur basketball historian and fan. And so they gleaned the best techniques from players of the past and incorporated them into Teapot's style. So he was a favorite because people had never seen anything like this before. I mean, here come the Pitstops flying down the court, and Teapot is dribbling behind his back as he's moving forward. It kind of gave you a dizzy sensation because you weren't sure exactly what you were seeing. And it was partly that element of surprise and amazement that threw off other teams. So in other words, he had a competitive advantage before he even took a shot. So guys, no wonder this guy was mobbed everywhere he went here in Pittstown during his playing heydays in the 30s and slightly into the 40s. But he's number one on our list of basketball stars of Pittsburgh past. And number two is another amazing player. It's Rento Selak. Rento Selak played in the early 50s through the late 50s. He had a pretty good career with the Pitstops. He was a center, tall for the time. And Rento, he was the kind of player that didn't say much. And so the team leadership weren't sure he was going to be the type of on-the-floor leader that you need from the big man in the middle. And instead of being a vocal locker room motivator and an on-court dominator, leader, getting the team to rally behind their pre-planned strategies and tactics on the floor, and corralling anybody that's not playing up to their potential as a good on-the-court player does. He worked with a method of demonstration, of example, and guilt. And his feeling was, I'm going to guilt my players into not playing up to my level. And Rento Seaclock, he was the guy that came in early for practice, stayed late after practice, helped other players with their games, folded chairs. He did whatever he had to do to show that he was he was in it to win it. And it's because of this quiet but effective example-style leadership that made him a fan favorite. Because he not only showed up for games early and practices early and stayed late for both, but he did the same thing with fan events, fan interaction events. So if he had to sign 2,000 autographs, guess what's going to happen? He's going to sign all 2,000 of them. He's not going to peter out after 50 or 60 like some of these stars. He's not going to have his staff come in and sign them like some of these stars today. I mean, I'm not going to name the stars, but there's been a few that bring in a team of 5 or 6 autograph signers to take over the role, and they signed thousands of autographs. Now, I don't blame somebody. Your hand starts to cramp up after a while, after a few thousand autographs. I get it. But this was a guy from the golden era of basketball in Pittsburgh who signed every autograph he was asked to sign. Don't you understand? He was a working man in a working man's town, and they loved him for it. Number 2 on our list of 3 fan favorites from the golden days of Pittsburgh Pitstop basketball. And number 3, guys. Number 3 is Wachele Zappa. Wachele Zappa was from the Italian League and came over in 1977 and dominated the Pitstops with an unbelievable jump shot. He had a layup. He had a spin-around dunker. And this guy had weapons coming at you from every angle. I mean, if he went low and you went low, he went high. If you went high, he went low. If you went left, he went right. The guy was a human cartoon zipping around that court, guys. And this is a guy with the Italian style, that Italian charm, that he was able to get the fans on board quickly. Not only was he a big point scorer, but he had the flash of the late 70s. He had the long hair flowing, right? He had the pearly whites. And he always wore some funky shoes that you never saw before. Basketball shoes with sparkles on them. Basketball shoes with paint little drawings that his kids made on them. You didn't see that in those days. He would glue pictures of his neighbor's dogs to his shoes. When he went to another town, he would draw a picture of the downtown of that town burning, right? Because he was trying to get under their skin. I mean, this is a guy that had personality and talent. It's not often you see that, guys, in the basketball courts, in the NBA. And he played a pretty long time. He played from, like I said, late 70s, and he was playing up till like 2007. He played 30 years for the Pitstops. And, it's not often that somebody plays in the NBA for 30 years. But he kept coming back with new marketing techniques, new crazy stunts, new ways to refresh and rejuvenate his image in the eyes of the fans. And as the team owners thought about it, they thought, well, he doesn't really score much anymore now that he's older. I mean, this was in the early 2000s. This is their thinking. He doesn't really score as much that he's older, but the guy is loved. And, he, you know, at a marketing dollar perspective, he's bringing in more awareness for this team than 10,000 billboards have in 3 decades. So he was an integral part of the team and is loved in this town to this day. He cannot go to the 24-hour fitness without 17 people wanting to, they'll stand at the end of the treadmill in a line. And so he's on the treadmill, and they hand him their 24-hour fitness hats and other gear and say, man, can you sign it? I watched you play. My kids watched you play, and we loved it. And then he'll go outside the gym, and he'll take photos with people for another hour and a half. This is every day, guys. So those are 3 of the big names, the big fan favorites in the history of Pittsburgh basketball, specifically the franchise that didn't make it, that is no longer here today, the legendary Pittsburgh Pitstops.